Family, family, family. Who does that song? I think it's the Soil. We
We
are
are family.
family,
Yes, that is
family.
so
Okay,
soil.
I just had to. I just had to. Parenting and family corner time. In many homes, the eldest child quietly carries an unspoken title. The backup parent. Palisa calls that child the deputy
The
parent.
deputy parent.
I say the president.
Hey, the
They're
deputy
the
president.
built-in babysitter, the homework supervisor, the peacemaker when siblings crash, and sometimes even the emotional support system for their parents. Responsibility often arrives long before adulthood does, and that takes away a little bit of the child elements that they should be experiencing at a young age. But carrying this role can also bring pressure, perfectionism, a weight of always having to hold everything together. We unpack this firstborn phenomenon with Dr. Uduak Bassey, who is a certified life practitioner and mental health advocate all the way from Nigeria. Doctor, welcome on the show.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me.
This is a powerful one because it's so layered, right? Because it depends on also the economic circumstances of each family. But that doesn't make it right. I don't know if it makes it wrong. That's where the complication even makes it a bit more unexplainable. What's your take of this backup parent being the elderly child?
Thank you, Benjamin, and good morning to you all. So first of all, let's start with a working definition of what parentification is all about. So when we say backup parents, when we say the fallback parent, what we actually are talking about is parentification. And what that means is when a child is given adult responsibilities, it can be functional roles like cooking for the family, perhaps even going to work to make money to support the family. It can be taking care of the younger ones. It can also be emotional, right? Emotional parentification, where a child is required to be the mediator between two conflicting adults, or perhaps support the other siblings emotionally, and so on and so forth. So there are different ways that this plays out. So the question becomes, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
Yes, that's the question I wanted to ask. Yeah.
Yes, so great. Predominantly how it's played out in African setting, because as a system, as a people, we have the culture of communal living, right? So how it is played out has tended towards the negative, where we have the first child being the closing the gap for parental inadequacies, be that intentional or otherwise. So yes, the way it is played out has tended towards the negative, where a child feels that they don't have a choice in the matter. They are chronically required to be there to close the gap for the parents, either functionally to take care of the others or to take care of the whole family, or emotionally. So that's where the problem has been, the chronic nature of it, the intensity that doesn't take into cognizance the developmental capacity of the child, and the fact that it's unsupported, where a child, for example, has to come back from school, attend to the younger ones, neglecting their own homework, their rest, neglecting the fact that they too should be playing like the others, because perhaps they're not too far apart in age, and they're wondering to themselves, my younger ones get to play and we're just a year apart in age, right? Why am I the one that has to take care of every other thing in the house? Why am I the one permanently required to be in charge? So that's where the problem is.
Doctor, let's speak about the effects, because parents are supposed to nurture, take care of all their children. And of course, there's a reason why parentification is even a word, because children then step out of their childhood role and become a part of the parenting structure. What kind of effects does this have on the parentified child?
Okay, there are actually a lot. Even from when they grow, there's going to be a sense of hyper independence, hyper vigilance, a sense of guilt. Of course, it's the loss of childhood Those are things that you can get back. There might also be resentment to the parents, resentment even for the siblings. Why do I need to be the one to sacrifice for the family to go on? So there'll be things like that showing off. Of course, there'll be burnout. There can be somatic responses, where a child begins to have physical response to such responsibilities, such expectations and pressures that are typically ignored. So there would be a lot of ways that shows out, not just when the child is young, but it can actually be carried out. It can still show up even when they're adults.
So with the African context, with many challenges of single-headed homes, how do you counter this? Because at times it's like a revert kind of thing. You just revert to it. You just kind of like, it's natural for us to do it this way because it's an African thing. These kids have to grow up anyway because, hey, we are poor and we need to make ends meet.
Yeah, I understand that. And indeed, it's an African thing in terms of, although we've evolved, the times have changed. We tend to see that in terms of awareness, there's a bit more awareness about this issue and how it's impacting people. But then what do we do when the practical, situation warrants this? For example, as you've mentioned, in a situation where there's financial stress, single parent home, perhaps even migration, like we're seeing, people are moving from Africa to the westernized world, where there's a little less social support, so they're needing to fall back to the firstborns to close those gaps. So what can be done? First of all, we need to be able to, a child needs to feel seen, a child needs to feel supported, a child needs to feel appreciated. So if we come at it with the fact that this is not your role, you're helping, you're assisting, right? That changes the dynamics. If we come at it with the fact that this child, while you're taking care of these responsibilities, you need to feel supported. So it can be questions like, how are you feeling? Are these roles too much for you? Do you need to take a break? Let the child have a sense of choice in the matter. That's where the problem comes, when there's no sense of choice, when they don't feel supported by the adult, they're not seen, they feel like they're the invisible ones, others get to have a life. But I'm required to just manage this responsibility. That's where the challenge comes in. So another way can be rotating chores, right? The other children in the house. So we can give chores in an age-appropriate way across board. Let it be seen as fair. It shouldn't be a natural thing that everything falls back by default to the firstborn. So simple things like that can begin to change the dynamics, the way the child begins to see this thing and internalizes the impact of it. So those are the kind of things that can do practically to help. And also, importantly, I must say this, because when we talk about migration and the reduced social support that migration might bring into a family, you may not have the extended family support like we typically do in Africa, but even in those societies, you can choose family by choice. What that means is identify with families that share your values, so that when there are, such gaps that require you to have an adult supervision, your firstborn isn't the natural default. You can leverage on one another and form communities, safe communities, that those things can happen without it being the sole responsibility of the firstborn.
All right, Doctor, let's take a break. I think this is such a layered conversation, and we'll look at the other layers, particularly looking at the effects well into adulthood and how this might affect, this particular parentified child as they become older. But also, how do you mend a relationship after a child is parentified? Stay with us, and we'll continue this conversation after the break.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Balisa and Benjamin fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
We're speaking about you, the deputy parent today, the parentified child, the one who to this day holds in the traumas and the weaknesses of having to be parentified when you were young and not being able to really express your challenges within your family unit. We're unpacking this in our Parenting and Family Corner with Dr. Uduak Bassey, who's a certified family life practitioner and mental health advocate that focuses on helping families build emotional resilience and purposeful parenting. We're speaking about children, but children become adults, and that's when the conversations really start. And now with social media, we see it so often. People say, speaking about the first daughter in the family, the first child, and the results of parentification. Let's speak about them here. What could those results be in adulthood if you were a parentified child?
Okay, thank you for the question. So typically what we tend to see would be a sense of hyper-independence, hyper-vigilance. So what that means is I can handle everything. I mean, I've always handled everything, right? So they're unable to ask for help when they need help. They're always looking out for people to fix. So it can be in friends, it can be in intimate partners. You'd see that they have a tendency to attract to themselves people that need help because that's how they've always seen themselves. So even the identity has shifted from being able to be vulnerable in relationships because they have to be in charge. They have this sense of I'm required to keep things in place. I mean, that's how I've always been. So you might see that they might have a bit of burnout. So yes, in some ways, the should I call it good side of it may have been that, yes, they have learned responsibility early. So they might have a drive that maybe other siblings don't have. They're high achievers. But with that, there's always an undertone of resentment. There could be an undertone of, inability to rest, that chronic need to perform, to be seen, because that's what the tie love to. Love to responsibility and achievements. So you might see that they might have a bit of guilt, they might have chronic stress, and might have even health challenges that come from inability to actually even identify that they have a need and speak up about it.
And also, the path to dealing with this must be also a difficult one, because what happens with parentification is that these firstborns usually take on the responsibility of their parents, some of them with a sense of compassion, others with a sense of regret, others with just no choice at all, and others feel responsible. So even that path to finding a resolution, speaking to your parent about this function, is probably a difficult thing to do in order to get some sort of healing.
Yeah, typically it would be. Of course, I mean, if you've grown up in that environment, chances are, so two ways, as you've said, they could have those that are feeling like, okay, well, I had to do this. The situation at hand warranted, someone steps in, and I'm glad I was the one that stepped in. But remember again that they were children, right? So even as they look back and they see their siblings, and some actually, because they carried it into adulthood, they're still almost seen as the one that have to ensure that their siblings, well into their 30s and 40s, are successful. So there would still be an undertone of regret. There'll still be an undertone of resentment, not just at the parents or even the circumstance. Sometimes they're not even able to name what it is that they're upset about. Right? It could just be the circumstance. I mean, my mom was widowed. What else could she do? She needed me, and so on and so forth. So they're not able to pinpoint that, yes, I'm also in some ways upset about how it turned out. I'm upset with my siblings. They're doing well, or their success was basically on the backbone of all I sacrificed for, right? So there would be that challenge, being able to talk about it, being able to seek closure in some way. So yes, that would be that. But when people are in that kind of space, it's also advisable to not numb it, not shut it down, but continue to have those conversations, particularly perhaps with a professional.
Yeah,
that would help.
Doctor, we know African parents, I guess the stigma of an African parent. And if this particular parentified now adult goes back to their parents, maybe they've been seeking therapy, maybe they've been wanting to speak about it and they want to mend the relationship and they bring it up and they've probably brought it up in small ways before and it's always sort of shut down like, hey, it was your role, you're the older one. What were we supposed to do? Are we supposed to not put food on the table so you don't take care of your siblings? siblings. How can a conversation like that begin within the family structure to mend and heal everyone in that structure?
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for that. So yes, it might happen that when you're trying to talk about it, when you're trying to express your, at least even say how you felt at that time, you might be shut down. So your goal is not to try to make them come to terms with the fact. They might never come to terms with the facts. For some, their parents are no longer available to even have those conversations, but it's to be able to find closure, again, preferably with professional help. Find closure for yourself. Come to a place of not just acceptance, but being able to remove yourself from the impact of that. And yes, again, it might be better, it might be faster when you do it with someone who is professionally trained to help with that.
You know, I think this stuff continues, Doctor. It's not like it stops at some point, like, oh, we all siblings, we've grown up, now you take care of yourselves. I feel like it evolves to something what we call here in South Africa the black tax. That even as the backup parent, when you guys were children, you end up even being the backup parent as an elder, because your mom would say, come on, you've been taking care of your siblings for so long. You can continue. They need this, they need that, they need that. So I think that trauma sometimes builds as a mainstream role that you assume even into your adulthood in many, many situations.
Yes, that's likely going to happen. At least we've seen, and I'm sure if you ask around, you see people who have been in that situation who are probably still having to take care of their siblings in their 30s, 40s, and perhaps 50s, right? In terms of decision making and so on and so forth. But I think it comes to a point where, especially when you see that it's having a negative impact on you emotionally and in every other way, you must be able to put your foot down and say no. So that's why we say some of the negative impact of this will be seen in people not being able to say no, to draw their boundaries. So it's important to, now that we are aware, what do I do to self-protect and not feel guilty about self-care? Right? Because also what you don't want to do is continue to teach your siblings learn helplessness. That now that they're able to stand on their feet, they're still needing to, to rely on you. So you must be able to do that. You must be able to ask for help. You must be able to come to a place of realizing that, yes, you did that at that time, but you don't need to continue to do that now. Now that they're no longer children, now that they're able to help themselves, they must be able to step up. And even for you, the person as well, you must be able to slowly begin to learn to be vulnerable, to be able to ask for help and receive help despite what has happened to you.
Well, it's a tough one, and I think it's definitely a conversation that can continue for a long time, but we have run out of time for having this conversation. What would your one final sentiment be to that deputy parent, whether they're still experiencing the effects of being parentified today and still hold that role, or even if they're still just dealing with the emotional implications of it? What is your message to them?
My message then would be so for someone who's still in that, situation, it would be to be able to speak up, right? It may not be to your parents, but it could be another family member who is able to listen to you, may be able to speak up, find ways for the chores. As I said, practical ways could be distribution of chores in a way that feels age appropriate and feels fair to everyone. So they must be able to speak up, find a way to release that burden, release that anger and all of that, because at the end of the day, they're still children, whether they're adolescents or even maybe younger. For someone who has gone through that, now that we're aware, what do we do? How can we better position as parents to be sure that we're not doing the same thing to our own children, right? So that's also really important, the fact that we're not transferring that to the next generation. And yes, now that we are aware, what can we do structurally to make sure that our environment, the homes that we are creating, are able to, there's emotional safety for every member of the family. So the problem is not that responsibilities are issues, right? It's not about responsibility, but it must be seen as fair. It must be seen as being supported. You must be seen as being appreciated. That will minimize the chronic stress and the strain that comes with it much later. And for anyone that had gone through it, I would always advise seek help.
All right.
Speak to somebody about it, release it from your heart, and find a way to find closure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Uduak Bassey. Thank you for giving us your time on this one. It's such a powerful conversation. Do you have a platform online where people can find you?
Oh, yes. On Instagram, my handle is at @I am_Uduak Bassey. And on Facebook, it's Uduak Bassey.
Thank you so much for your time and joining us here on Channel Africa. We'll speak a little bit about this one, but right now, let's quickly move on and get our sports.